Hey everyone, it's me, Joe. Just wanted to say that I'm grateful for every single one of you. Your support means a lot to me. Thanks to those who are returning, and hello to first-time listeners. Alright, get comfy, and let's get on to the stories. I'm a retired Marine who has seen my fair share of combat. I've had plenty of close calls in my lifetime, and some crazy stories to go with them. That said, I've never encountered anything quite like a Wendigo. To preface this story, I want you to understand, I'm very familiar with cryptids. I spent years studying them as a hobby, even while in the military. So, when I found one roaming the woods in my area, you can imagine how excited and shocked I was all at the same time. My first run-in with one was while driving home late one night. I rounded a corner and nearly totaled my vehicle by hitting something massive. The thing left the scene quickly and unscathed, but not before I saw its body and smelled the stench of rotting meat. Being it was so close to where I was living, I made it a point to be wary. I didn't want myself or anyone in the area to be in danger, so I readied myself to go looking for this thing. The next morning, I got up bright and early, prepared a few things, and went looking for any sign of this beast. I knew they were more likely to come out at night, but I wanted to see if I could find any clues as to where it was holed up at. As I searched the area, I noticed that I couldn't find too much going on, so I geared up and prepared to camp for the night. I had a few things up my sleeve should I encounter the thing. I loaded my weapons with silver bullets and made sure to have plenty of flammables on hand. I waited, and the first night was tense. I could hear a ton of rustling in the woods, and at one point, I saw the thing staring at me from the darkness. I sat by my campfire and drew my weapon, but before I could do much, it was gone. It wasn't long after that I decided to turn in. As I headed to sleep, I felt the presence of the thing. I was quite sure it was stalking me now, and as such, I laid down gun in hand, prepared to feign sleep and fire. The thing never made its move. Either it had an idea of what I was planning, or it was waiting, possibly trying to simply intimidate me into leaving, or even trying to drive me mad with paranoia. The second part of that thought is what concerned me the most. I had my fair share of trauma from the days in battle. All that said, I wasn't too concerned. It's best not to panic in battle situations. The next morning I got some sleep and waited. I ate a little bit before I fell asleep. Once again, I did my best to lure out the creature at this point, but I didn't even sense it. On the second night, the third night, however, I could hear it stalking me again. It moved almost in step with me, so it wasn't easy to keep up with where it was. That said, there were a few moments where it felt like it would intentionally step slightly out of concert with my own steps as a way to say, "I see you, and I'm following you right now." Again, it felt like a way to intimidate me. I was a Marine. I don't get intimidated easily, but I will admit, this was slightly unnerving. Nothing overly so, but enough to make me think for a moment if I really wanted to keep this hunt up at all. Like, honestly, maybe I should quit, you know? As any good soldier does, though, I continued. I had a mission. I wasn't about to just give up on it, and I felt like my neighborhood would be in danger if this thing was just left out here. Nothing else happened that night. The fourth night, however, I awoke to the sound of an animal slowly dying. I knew it was that damn thing doing the killing, but before I could figure out where it was for sure, I heard a loud thud and my tent caved in on top of me. I could smell rotting flesh and spent a few rounds fearing this thing was now on top of me. When I finally got out, however, I realized I had tossed a dead deer's carcass that I had just eaten part of at my tent. It seemed the Wendigo for sure knew that I was there and it wanted to play games, and it knows that I wasn't going to put up with it. I got up and began to eye the trees closely. I couldn't see the thing, but I knew it was out there watching me. I reloaded my weapons and prepared to go further out. This was a night I wasn't going to just let by. I was going to make something happen. I was going to find this thing, and I was going to kill it. A familiar stench filled the air, and the woods grew quiet. I scanned the area when I heard something from behind me. I turned, a fire, but then I heard a voice. It was the voice of a dead friend. This thing clearly mimicked it to scare me, but all it did was piss me off even more. I headed as fast as I could toward the voice, gun drawn, and that's when I saw for a moment before it sprinted deeper into the woods, angry. I continued pursuing the thing, but as I did, I realized what was happening. This thing was luring myself into a trap. I prepared myself and slowed my pace. It was too late, though. As I came into a clearing, I noticed an old cabin. That's when I was ambushed by wolves. I turned and fired away at them. I felt the thing had somehow influenced them, and I wasn't going down that easily. I killed many before the rest stopped and slowly backed away into the woods. That's when the thing stepped out, staring me down. I was almost overwhelmed by the stinking, rotting stench of the creature, but I kept the contents of my stomach in check as I readied my weapon. I aimed and fired at the thing, which moved so quickly that it looked as though it had vanished. The next thing I knew, I was hit and sent flying from my side into a tree. I felt my head aching as I struggled to stand before something stabbed me through the left side of my stomach. I looked down to see a stick pinning me down. I raised my weapon and fired off a few rounds before I felt my gun knocked out of my hand. The thing was standing before me with one of my hands in its grip. It smelled so foul that I could barely breathe, and I began vomiting. With what little sense I had left to me, I reached for a flask of gasoline I had on me, threw it open into the creature before pulling my lighter out and lighting the sucker up. It held on to me as its body began to burn before finally letting go. Reeling in pain, I was feeling dizzy and grabbed the stick and pulled it hard enough to get it free from the tree, and then I picked my lighter up and walked over and set the cabin on fire. After that, I hopped out of the woods in pain, and somewhere near home, I collapsed. I was found by a neighbor and a good friend who saw me coming out of the woods while looking to see the source of the smoke. He took me to a hospital, and I woke 3 days later, still alive. I don't feel great about the hunt, to be honest. I probably wouldn't do that again if I didn't have to. I almost died, and I was foolish to believe I could easily handle a Wendigo. I still have nightmares of the thing and my encounter with it to this day. The Pacific Northwest is a place of wonder, and where we believe creatures of lore exist. There have been too many various sightings here. I wouldn't say demonic nature, more like there are tangible beings. The skies are vast, the air is clean, and there is a mystic feeling here. Almost as if when you turn a corner, you might see a fairy. We never want to live anywhere else. I've been renting a farm-style house with my 2 grandchildren, my son, and his fiancée for almost 3 years now. We have a well under the back of our house and a pump house behind us. There are about 10 acres of land looking out towards Mount Rainier, and we have a 2-car garage connected to a big workshop. Next to us is a forest. All the things I will be describing have been spread out since we have lived on this property. Sometimes we hear screams coming from the forest, and all the wildlife becomes still and quiet. Occasionally we've listened to what sounds like a metal chair scraping on a concrete floor in the distance that echoes over our land. I've spoken to the young man and his brother who currently live on the same lot, but closer to the forest, and they told me that they hear it too, but stay in after dark because it feels like they're being watched. They all think there's something off with this land. His brother also shared that he sees a demon boy, as he put it, in his room, as well as other places in the house. I ask him why he calls him a demon, in which he replies, "Because he scares me and messes with my stuff." I don't really think it is a demon, but what he saw and what we saw in our house will be for another time to tell. As for the noises in the forest, I have compared these sounds to various wildlife indigenous to the area, but found nothing. This was when we first moved here on the property that is surrounded by farms. One late night, I was driving down the lonely road home, lit only by a handful of streetlights, when I saw a flash of eyes in the distance. Not wanting to hit what I thought might be a deer, I slowed down. When I arrived where I thought it was gone. But the side of the headlights shined on something grayish-white, and I noticed something almost the size of a man crawling into the bushes. I saw its back muscles and shoulder blades and its back leg. There was no fur, no tail, and no feathers. just light-colored muscles. I quickly turned the corner, hoping to see it crawl over the train tracks on the other side of the bushes, but it wasn't there. So I went home. I know what I saw in my headlights. I'll try to compile all that we have seen in these 3 years. We know there is something going on with this land. My 2 adult children, my son's fiancé, and I have seen this tall white creature. It stands about 7 feet tall with large eyes peeking around the workshop, revealing its head, chest, shoulder, arms, and its hands on the wall and part of its foot. Or it peeks into the garage window, and we have seen this on many occasions, a few times from my son's window upstairs. I continued pursuing the thing, but as I did, I realized what was happening. This thing was luring myself into a trap. I prepared myself and slowed my pace. It was too late, though. As I came into a clearing, I noticed an old cabin. That's when I was ambushed by wolves. I turned and fired away at them. I felt the thing had somehow influenced them, and I wasn't going down that easily. I killed many before the rest stopped and slowly backed away into the woods. That's when the thing stepped out, staring me down. I was almost overwhelmed by the stinking, rotting stench of the creature, but I kept the contents of my stomach in check as I readied my weapon. I aimed and fired at the thing, which moved so quickly that it looked as though it had vanished. The next thing I knew, I was hit and sent flying from my side into a tree. I felt my head aching as I struggled to stand before something stabbed me through the left side of my stomach. I looked down to see a stick pinning me down. I raised my weapon and fired off a few rounds before I felt my gun knocked out of my hand. The thing was standing before me with one of my hands in its grip. It smelled so foul that I could barely breathe, and I began vomiting. With what little sense I had left to me, I reached for a flask of gasoline I had on me, threw it open into the creature before pulling my lighter out and lighting the sucker up. It held on to me as its body began to burn before finally letting go. Reeling in pain, I was feeling dizzy and grabbed the stick and pulled it hard enough to get it free from the tree. And then I picked my lighter up and walked over and set the cabin on fire. After that, I hopped out of the woods in pain, and somewhere near home, I collapsed. I was found by a neighbor and a good friend who saw me coming out of the woods while looking to see the source of the smoke. He took me to a hospital, and I woke 3 days later, still alive. I don't feel great about the hunt, to be honest. I probably wouldn't do that again if I didn't have to. I almost died, and I was foolish to believe I could easily handle a Wendigo. I still have nightmares of the thing and my encounter with it to this day. My family comes from the Dominican Republic, and you don't usually hear about a lot of supernatural stuff going on around since they have a low belief in the supernatural. A little background on my dad. He is 6'1" and is very athletic and loves fishing. Until one night, my dad came across what I believe is a dog man. Him and 4 of his friends went out one night fishing to a rural location where one side of the road is for sugarcane, and the other side of the road is where you can see the ocean, and if you're not careful, you can fall off and die. My dad says that everything was quiet. It was one of those times where you could hear anything. You could hear a lot of dogs barking and animals walking. He said he had this strong gut feeling like someone was walking or watching him. He looks around everywhere and sees nothing. About 10 minutes later, he goes to check around again and nothing is out of place. His friend A says, "Hey, the nearest gas station is about 7 miles away, and it's really dark to go on foot." So they decided to take the motorcycle they had mounted at the back of the Jeep. My dad says that halfway back to the gas station, he sees this black figure running through the hard sugarcane like nothing, and he starts to think it's his imagination, so he leaves it alone at first. About 5 minutes after his friend A stops the motorcycle, shuts off the engine, and tells my dad to be very silent because there's a black figure on 4 legs following them. He first thought it was a dog, but once he noticed the long, human-looking legs, he knew it was something very dangerous. My dad says the creature or thing got on the 2 legs and looked straight at them for what felt like an eternity. He describes it as 7-8 feet tall, muscular with a gray-dark fur, had long human-looking hands, and a German shepherd-looking snout with sharp teeth from the beginning to the end of a snout. He says it had a humanoid-looking face, and he saw blue eyes. But the most creepy part about this encounter was the deep, chill growl and deep, creepy howl before jumping back to the sugarcane. My dad says he spent a week with high fevers and chills. Every time a dog howled at night, he says that after that encounter, he had never been fishing at night again either. This happened about 3 to 4 years ago. I live in Utah and have been camping my whole life. When I was roughly 12, I was in the Boy Scouts and went on a lot of camping trips with my troop every year. My troop went on an overnight camping trip to a lake in the winter mountains called Wall Lake, where we'd backpack in a mile or so and camp around said lake. When I was old enough to join Boy Scouts, my troop had already been the year before, but one of the boys claimed to have seen a naked man running around the woods. No one really took him seriously, but it became a running joke that we would see this so-called naked man when we went to Wall Lake. The first year was pretty unremarkable until our hike back. When we were hiking back to our cars, we spotted the naked man about 100 feet away in the woods. After that, none of us doubted the kid who reported seeing him the year before. The next year, I was 13. We went again, and of course we were all joking about the naked man again. Nothing out of the ordinary happened until we were packing down our camps to get ready to go home. While we were taking down our tents, one of the boys yells, "Hey, look, it's the naked man!" He was pointing at the top of a nearby cliff, and sure enough, there he was, completely naked, except for a cloth wrapped around his face like a turban and a satchel over his shoulder. We all just stood there for a while, and a few of the older boys were yelling questions at him. He stayed quiet for the whole thing, but eventually he pointed at us, put his hand to his hips, and pushed down in a pull-your-pants-down motion. At this point, we were thoroughly creeped out, and he vanished from the cliff top. We all packed down faster than we've ever packed down a camp before, and sped back to our cars. I've still gone on trips to Wall Lake since, but I haven't seen any signs of the guy. He was apparently seen by enough people that he was reported in the news. At the time of these events, I wasn't too scared, but looking back, I have no idea what this guy wanted or what he could have done, and that's what scares me about this whole thing. My name is Rain, and I am a 25-year-old male living in Missouri. I will state that I am an atheist, and the dog man is the only thing that I can say is not supernatural. My first encounter takes place on December 20th, 2017, at Anna M. Adams River Access. My first trip was alone in November or October of the same year. If you're leaving Lebanon, Missouri on Highway 32 and continuing to Falcon, you will come up on Highway K. On your left, there is a sign there with a raccoon on it that has the access name on it. Turn down K and continue to Don Road. It is the first road on the right. The whole turn here is surrounded by tall pine trees. Don Road is an uncapped road that leads through dense forest and then a big farm afterward. I recommend a vehicle of 4x4, especially if it has rained or snowed in the past few days. Past the farm, continue straight. You will pass a house on the left before a sharp turn with a guardrail. The turn left before the sharp turn right is the driveway to the access parking lot. I put out the directions for other investigators and warnings for those who stay away. They can't stay away if they don't know where it is. That's any time of day. This is an eerie place, dead silent. The river the access is connected to is a dasco, not a river. My first time here was to get a feel for the area. I enjoy conservation centers, and I was curious about what this place was like. How peaceful. It is very peaceful, but an uncomfortable level. Going down the driveway, you will see a fence, and if you follow it with your eyes, you will see a red cattle gate sort of hidden. I took pictures of it and the rest of this area to show Renee, my girlfriend, in the pictures. The red gate was closed and looked secure in place. This changes later. I got the feeling I was being watched, and the idea that I should not go down to the riverfront. I quickly left without panicking to keep myself from scaring myself. Fast forward to December 20th. I was following some dogman sightings and stories from the area in the past 20 years. I found a few in a herd of one falcon by the river. In the summer of 2017, it was just some day that I wondered about werewolves being real and watched some horror films. There was snow and ice everywhere, and we were surprised that my little car, a '93 Subaru, survived the trip to and from. Renee was with me, and as I was showing her the place, I found the ride through the mud talked about the sightings and once of the dogmen in the area, and what we would expect, and that we should respect the woods and territory. Back then, I was a bit of a nut about it, but I don't think my superstition has anything to do with my psychedelic encounter. When we pulled up, we have both forgotten what we were talking about on the way. Some more backstory. Renee didn't think it was serious. In reality, I'm schizophrenic, and I would understand she thought that I was delusional. I wasn't the first to have the being watched feelings. We went down the concrete ramp and began to compete on who could throw rocks the furthest onto the ice. The river was frozen over. I then stopped and told her that I had a very bad feeling that we were being watched. Renee said that she had started before me but didn't want to spook me. The idea of something, someone, or anything watching was a horrifying idea, and it didn't help that we talked about the dogman on the way here. We quickly walked to my car, trying to seem as relaxed as possible. It could have been a mountain lion stalking us. We really didn't know the truth, but we were still assuming the worst. We tore out of there as fast as I could drive without sliding into the mud and wrecking. The entire time, we both felt like something was all around us, watching us and closing in on us. We were very vocal and informative with each other. It was only until we got on the Highway 32 that we started to relax, and the feelings started to go away. At that time in our relationship, she still lived with her parents at 19. So I took her home, and then I went home and thought long and hard about what had just happened, and if it was real. Before bed, I was able to distract myself with my music and video games. So I was doing that and napping. I had this dream of sitting in my living room with Renee. Then she starts to wig out, twist, expand, and then turn into the dogman. I pulled out my knife to defend myself and ran myself into a corner. I was freaking out and crying. My dream ended with the dogman standing in front of me with his arms high and now in his head coming down. I remember the hair and the smell of this thing. I'm freaking myself out now just by talking about it. I am then seeing my home from the outside before jolting awake. I probably fell back to sleep 10 or so minutes later. At 6 a.m., I called my girlfriend to tell her about my dream. She had one to tell me as well. Hers was almost exactly the same, only it was in her perspective of changing into becoming a dogman. She described the look of my face and the fear. She too woke up at 3 a.m. that same night as I did. She didn't think that it was real until then. We are both straightforward thinkers and logical. She then told me that the red gate from the picture had changed. It was more broken when she saw it at the access. My third trip there was with my friend Alex, who was skeptical, and then was when I saw the red gate for myself, and it was all distorted. Anything could have happened to it, but nobody comes out here. Everything looks untouched. In legend and other encounter victims, it is said that dogmen are telepathic, and many have had nightmares following their encounters. Many say that they dream of seeing what the creature sees as a ride-along and are unable to direct themselves. As we are stuck in some sort of trance, they run with it through the forest and come to an opening with our houses, and they can see some sort of distorted version of their own home. I have done my own research and got a lot of evidence and theories of what may have happened. The Dry Knob access, which is the first access you come to across on Highway 32 if heading from Lebanon, I found claw marks and shaving of trees, big patches of disturbed grass and dirt as if something had jumped and landed. We have deer in that area, and I could see their path through the very tall grass. Dry Knob is a much bigger place than Adams Access, and is more popular for picnickers and fishermen. There is an old clear trail from the gravel driveway into the woods. When it rains a lot, this area is always flooded, and it is obvious that the way the plants have grown and how it looks that it hasn't been touched for a long time. I found a stack of medium-sized branches and a tree that were definitely broken in an obvious way. When it gets me through, it is on the path, Near its entrance, I found a shotgun shell under the old leaves. You're not supposed to hunt here. Since then, I have calmed down on my research and set it aside. I felt that I was going to get into uncharted territory that is best left alone. This story takes place in Poland. I have one friend who has always been an atheist, and I was a Christian, but things were changing as time grew up, and I sort of lost my religion too. My story happened a year ago. I became kind of an atheist, and later started to read about Slavic mythology, as I was always interested in history. Sometime later, I became pagan, and my friend, who I mentioned, has become pagan awesome. A year ago, we decided to build an order for our gods. We found a nice place with a fallen tree in the middle of a forest, as forests are sacred places in the religion of our ancestors, and we had chosen a place with a big fallen tree because a fallen tree struck by lightning is also scared, due to believing that it was hit by Peron, which is a Slavic god of thunder. So we started building the place, and our first altar was devoted to Velez, the god of the underground, the forests of magic. The second altar was built for Savok, god of the sky, sun, and fire. The things have started to become paranormal when we decided to build an altar for Paran. Our two previous altars were simple, just wooden beams with symbols inserted into the ground. For Peron's altar, we decided to carve a face in the beam. So I got a knife and hammer and started carving a face. And this was where I first encountered something otherworldly. As I was carving the face, I wanted to see what my friends were doing, as there were 3 of us in total, because we took one of our friends with us to build the place. When I was turning around to see what they were doing, I noticed something downhill as our place was built on a small hill. Passing from tree to tree, when it got behind the second tree, it was gone. This something was human-shaped and didn't have a face, and it was wearing a white dress covering all its body. A few days after, we were at the place, and we wanted to make a campfire to cook some food and get some nice vibes. It was complete darkness in the forest, and at this time of year in Poland, it gets dark around 4 p.m. So we were in the middle of the forest surrounded by darkness, and we only had our smartphones' flashlights. We couldn't light the fire because it was winter and everything was wet. As we couldn't see anything, we only could see about a meter or 2 in front of us thanks to our flashlights. We decided to collect bark from the tree because it should have been dry, and we should be able to light the fire with it. As we were doing this, we started to hear footsteps down the hill where I saw a ghost. This is where I got scared, and we stood as close to each other as we could, took out our knives, and were just standing there with foam flashlights and our weapons ready, listening to the footsteps. It was something like 3 to 4 footsteps and a pause for a moment, and then 3 to 4 more footsteps, like something was going around us, not getting close to our flashlights, and we were freaking out. We decided to run in the opposite direction to where we heard the footsteps. We were running through the forest until we encountered a road. Then we just started to walk, and we got out of the forest. At this moment, I wanted to say why the footsteps couldn't be a human or animal. So as I mentioned, it was complete darkness in the forest, and you couldn't see anything without a flashlight. So it couldn't be human, because he would not see anything in the forest. How would he know to get close to us without using a flashlight? We started to run out of the forest. We were scared, but me and my friends decided to go back there to check what it was. I think we felt the adrenaline rush, and that's why we chose to return. We also asked our third friend if he wanted to come with us, but he chose to stay. When we finally arrived, we noticed that nothing had changed, and everything was fine, and so we returned. When we were getting out of the forest, my friend suddenly got scared, and I asked him if everything was all right. He said he'd just seen a ghost to the crossroads. I asked him what the ghost looked like, and he described the same one I'd seen while carving faces. When we got out the forest, we were walking on a normal road and the forest was behind us. We turned our heads, and behind us we saw 2 figures coming out the forest following us. At first we just thought they were some people. We were constantly turning our heads behind us to see if they were still following us. They were still there, but at some point when we turned, they were gone, and they turned in the other direction because we were walking through a straight road without any turns. And then we realized those two figures were weird because we didn't see them earlier when we were at the forest. They just appeared out of nowhere when we left, and they looked the same. They had the same height, same male shape, and no face or anything. Me and my friend think that they could be sort of guardians of the forest. I know that my two friends later saw the white woman ghost again at the same time when she was wandering through the railroad within the forest. This was everything that we encountered in that place. We went back after, but didn't see the white woman or any other ghost. I then realized that the paranormal activity ended with winter. It was very strange. We still go back to the forest sometimes, but haven't returned to our altar in a very long time. I really do wonder what this could be about.